Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. Once again, today we have the case of Paige Doherty. I warn you that this story has a rather strange logic, very irrational, and at the same time interesting. The truth is that the conclusion is not unexpected. I won't share more about this case as we have a lot to discuss, and it will be lengthy. She is Paige Doherty. Born on April 18th of the year 2000, Paige lived her entire life with her family in Clydebank, Scotland. At the time of the events, she was 15 years old, about to turn 16. She lived with her mother, Pamela Monroe, and her stepfather, Andy Monroe, along with her two brothers and sister. Paige and her family didn't usually have problems. For all we know, they got along very well. And I don't say it just because, but rather because it could be seen. We're talking about the year 2016, in which, obviously, there was a lot of technology, as there is now. Paige, her family, and friends were active on social media and frequently posted using their cell phones. She had photos with her mother and had expressed gratitude for her stepfather several times. It was clear that she was greatly appreciated, not only by her friends, but also her family. There is a documentary on YouTube that speaks very highly of her, showing the affection people had for her. She seems to have been a truly beloved person. In addition to that, Pamela had Paige at a fairly young age. Therefore, they had common interests. They had things that both of them liked, that were compatible. Consider this small detail in the investigation. And she had recently dyed her hair dark brown. There's not much more to say. She had a typical family without apparent issues or excessive conflict. She was a girl who always had her cell phone on her, never let her battery run out, answered almost all messages immediately. And also, she worked part-time at a hair salon, which was, in fact, one of her most desired jobs. She wanted, after finishing high school, to stay in that kind of career. Also, quite an important detail. With that, let's proceed to the facts. This all starts on March 18th, 2016. Paige had stayed at a friend's house to sleep before going to work. Actually, her friend's house was not far from her own house, so the commute to work was the same. On the morning of March 19th, when she wakes up, she leaves her friend's house and heads to work. Since it was very early in the morning, she decides to do what she did every Saturday, which was to head directly to a store to buy breakfast, a sandwich, something to eat. She leaves her friend's house, and that's where the news about her whereabouts ends. Let's remember the year 2016. She's with her cell phone. She never lets her battery run out. She sends messages all the time. She's on social networks all the time. She never lacked a way to communicate with other people. Let's say that Paige's mother, her sisters, her friends, wouldn't be too worried about her, as they could communicate normally all day long, in addition to her being busy at work. At that time, Paige had a boyfriend named Dylan. He received a message from her every morning to say good day, and that morning, he didn't receive it. Now, as for concern, he wasn't worried the first few hours of the day because he knew she had to go to work and that she would probably be, let's say, all morning going to work, which wasn't so close to her. Meanwhile, Paige's mother, sisters, friends were also not too worried, as it was the same situation. The thing is, Dylan was expecting a good morning message because it was normal in their relationship for that to happen. When he didn't receive it, he began to worry. But she was probably on her way to work, at work, or maybe even somewhere, eating, having breakfast, out of battery perhaps. So it wasn't the first thing he thought that something might have happened. However, when noon came and he still hadn't received any messages, he decided to contact the hair salon to ask if maybe she was already there, if she arrived safely, etc. At the hair salon, when they answer, they tell him that she hadn't arrived, that she hadn't said anything or given any notice, that she simply hadn't gone to work. That's when she started to worry and called Paige's mother to let her know that she hadn't arrived at work. When Pamela answers the phone, she realizes that all morning, Paige hadn't let her know that she had arrived safely at work, nor that she was on her way. Nothing at all. Now, in reality, she had been going to work for quite some time. Let's say it wasn't something new. It wasn't a new route. She usually knew how to take care of herself. So, at first she wasn't worried. She decided to wait a bit. She decided to think that maybe she was getting to work. That maybe something had happened. That her phone was out of battery. that the bus was delayed. Anything. However, as the hours went by, Dylan set about checking if his girlfriend had been on social media or had interacted, even a small sign of her phone having battery. So, he starts checking all of his girlfriend's social media and realizes that she hadn't liked anything anywhere. She hadn't commented, communicated, or interacted with anyone since the previous night, which was extremely strange, given that Paige was always glued to her phone. And this might seem like something too specific, something too superficial, to notice if she maybe was with her phone, but think about it. We all wake up with our phone next to us. We all wake up knowing we can check messages. Going on Instagram, Twitter, even YouTube, like you are doing now. And to our friends, our followers. They see that we have interactions, so it's not something out of place. It's something very easy to check. And Paige hadn't been connected on any platform. That's when they really got worried, because it was already past noon. She hadn't called anyone. She hadn't communicated in any way. They suspected something bad, like robbery, had happened to her. She needed help. So it was that afternoon that they called the police. Fortunately, she was 15 years old, so the police acted quickly. The search for the missing girl started swiftly, with investigators working alongside her parents to piece together her activities throughout the day. Meanwhile, on social media, her friends were posting things about her. Photos trying to see if anyone had seen her somewhere, trying to find someone who had seen her that day, someone who had information about something that happened, or even some minor detail. Unfortunately, by the time the sun went down, Paige was still nowhere to be found. A search team was then assembled, along with more volunteers to go find her somewhere. Maybe she was lost on some street. Alternatively, maybe someone stole her or something like that, and therefore she couldn't return home. However, she was not found that day. The family quickly made a Facebook account to share what she was wearing, to share pictures of her and give some extra details about where she was and where she should have been at the time of the disappearance. In addition, they also looked for her in places she used to frequent. Maybe she just hadn't had a good day and had gone somewhere to rest, so they decided to look for her in familiar places. But they didn't find her. They also put up papers everywhere with Paige's face on them to see if anyone recognized her along her route. They specifically put these papers near the bus stop to see if perhaps something had happened to her there before she got on, to know if anyone had seen her there, and to rule out some things. The theories then started coming in, and little by little they realized that she probably hadn't gone anywhere, escaping from her home or her life. She didn't tell anyone about running away. She didn't take anything important. She only had her cell phone and a little money for transportation. So, in general, it didn't seem like she had run away. The police then began to reconstruct step by step her entire route, from her friend's house to the bus stop, to see what they could discover in that stretch. One of the most important parts of this journey is a street with many little shops. As you can see in this photo, there is a roadway for people to walk, a place for cars to park, and some little shops all together, one after the other. Among them were very essential things like, for example, a market, a place to buy everyday things. Then there was a bakery, and even semi-restaurants, places where they prepare food to take away or to eat on the spot. A deli shop, as they call it there, or rather delicatessen, a place where they made food to eat right away, let's say, to take away. And it's also the place where Paige occasionally bought her breakfast whenever she went to the hairdresser's. She passed by this place every time she went to work. She had to pass by there since she didn't change her route. One would think that with how everything is arranged here, the shop owners would more or less remember the faces of the people who pass by. And even, the family said that every so often, Paige would greet the people who were in the shops. So let's say she did know them by face. The police went from shop to shop asking if anyone knew Paige, recognized her, had spoken to her, or had seen her that Saturday. One of the places where they got an immediate response was at the bakery that was there. The owner confirmed that he saw her pass by that same place around 8:15. I can say this with certainty, as every time at the same schedule, that is, at 8, I started making sandwiches, bread, I started cooking, so I knew she was there at that time. And also, he greeted her from behind the bakery's glass, and she responded back. He knew perfectly well the time was 8:15. She passed by there, and saw her go to Sean's Deli, which was halfway down the block. This was John Litham's delicatessen. This is where Paige usually bought breakfast. In addition, the investigators also asked about security cameras to see if anyone had cameras outside the premises, to be able to see where Paige was heading. Most places had cameras inside to monitor for theft, allowing clear views of people's faces. There was only one store that had cameras on the outside, but the good thing was that it covered most of the block, most of the stores. So it was useful to the police. At first, all they took were 3 hours of video to see where Paige had gone. All they needed was to simply see where she was going, so they took that piece of video for review. The strange thing about all this is that at 8:21 anti-meridiem, you can see how Paige enters Sean's Deli store, but over the course of the next 3 hours, she can't be seen leaving. She had been there and no one saw her leave. You can clearly see her enter and arrive at the place. And for 3 hours, no one could really find the scene where she left. Where could she be? Could she have left through another door? Maybe the owner knew of another exit she used? Several officers watched this tape, checked minute by minute. In fact, they divided the video to watch it in different groups, and no one could find the moment when she leaves. Unfortunately, in the midst of all this, and in the midst of the review, the family receives a statement from the Glasgow police saying that they may have found their daughter. A person walking along Great Western Road discovered 2 legs sticking out of a bush. They didn't want to see any more. They simply called the police and told them what they had found. And when they got there, they realized that there was obviously a body. At the time, 3 girls were missing in the area, so one of them could have been Paige, but it was also possible that none of them were. The thing is that the person discovered had dark brown hair, and one of the missing girls had blonde hair, so only 2 were left. According to what the mother said, she, in fact, at that time already expected it to be Paige who had been found. She had little positivity left about this. She knew what her daughter was like and knew she wouldn't just run away from home, so she knew something must have happened. Also, after examining the place where the body was found, it was concluded that it had been transported there. The crime had been committed elsewhere, and the place where she was found was simply where she had been left. After a few hours, the other girl who was missing, besides Paige, returned home. So the only remaining possibility was that the body found was hers. The family was called to identify the body, and they determined that yes, indeed, it was Paige's. At that point, then, the autopsy began. The result of this showed that the body had more than 250 wounds, many of them stabbings. Regarding this, Paige's mother described a rather ugly scene, in which she could see that the body had so many wounds that part of the neck was no longer there. It's a bit strange, actually, at least for me. This is something I usually say in cases where there are also several wounds or many stabbings. It usually means that the person responsible had some kind of feeling towards the victim. It wasn't something casual, but rather something driven or provoked by, perhaps, revenge, jealousy. In most cases, let's say the stabbings indicated that the person responsible knew her. It caught my attention at that moment that Paige walked into the deli so casually. Let's say there was no one chasing her. She didn't seem worried. At least she didn't look worried. And yet, she turned out to have more than 60 stab wounds on her body. That's why I say it's a bit odd. Let's say it couldn't have been a crime of attempted abuse or attempted robbery. It was more personal. But in addition to that, there were wounds of all kinds with different instruments, which would mean that the person had time to go look for other ways to torture her. That is, they didn't just pull out a knife and start causing the wounds, but they also took their time to go for different instruments. There were marks from different knives and also screwdriver marks. Paige's mother also clarifies that the wounds on her daughter's body seemed to be more. Based on her observations of the body and the forensic report, she estimated there were over 500 wounds in total. And that the news outlets were making everything a bit lighter when sharing the details. The investigators went to take the testimony of Sean, the owner of the last place she was seen. He told them that he didn't know her, hadn't seen her, and couldn't remember every face that came into the store. He said it's likely that she came in to shop, but he didn't remember. What's strange is that, beyond whether you spoke to the person or not, you'd probably remember who you served when you see a photo. If someone passes by the same place every weekend, you eventually remember who they are to some extent. However, he didn't remember. But, well, he didn't remember, and that's debatable, let's say. Maybe it could be true. However, after a while of questioning, he admits that he did see her, that he remembers seeing her come in, that she bought something, and then she went to the bus stop. He said that was the last time he saw her, and that she seemed completely normal, that nothing was wrong with her. So, where did the crime occur? That is, they never saw her leave there, but maybe the camera was malfunctioning. Let's say that something must have happened to her between the deli and the bus station. But apart from that, the place where she was found was not far from her home. That is, her job was 19 kilometers away. So in short, it was more likely that she hadn't taken the transport, that something simply happened to her before that. While all this was happening, while they were deliberating about what had happened, as always, there were people who just wanted to draw attention. While the family was concerned about finding out who was responsible for Paige's death, a boy on the internet began showing his friends and people she knew a bloody knife, and he began to say that he had been the one responsible. Obviously, it wasn't him, and honestly, I have no idea why he would do something so irresponsible. It was an insulting waste of time for the family, but let's say the police contacted him and asked if he was really responsible, and he said no. This tends to happen, in some cases. There are people who claim to be responsible for murders. I don't fully grasp the logic, but it's just one of many dubious aspects of this case. As I said before, the police questioned John. He told them that he had already come and gone, but the police knew this was not true, because she is never seen leaving the place. So they decide to ask John for the tapes inside the store. John was already being somewhat suspicious because of the lies he told the police, but he decided to give them the camera videos without any problem. Let's say, as if it was nothing, as if nothing happened. The problem was that when the police started reviewing the video, they found nothing. There were cut pieces all over, and the important parts where Paige was supposed to be inside the store, no, they don't exist. They were. To all this, the case already seemed like a bad joke. It couldn't be such a joke in which Paige didn't exist on the cameras and wasn't seen leaving the store. There were no explanations for that. The police then expanded their search to a larger time frame on the exterior cameras. They had started with 3 hours and ended up being 12 hours of review to examine at what point she entered and at what point she left. She might have left hours later, but not at any point. Do you see her leaving the deli? However, they found some more interesting things, like, for example, that Sean was acting very strange. Around 10 in the morning, you see him running to the supermarket, to the little market that was there on the corner. Meanwhile, the neighbors and people passing by said that his store was closed, that while he was at the market, the metal curtain was completely closed. At 10 in the morning, and it's almost noon when he is seen back, leaving the store to go to his car, to the back, and start clearing some things. His behavior up to this point is clearly somewhat strange. On the outside camera, however, there is a part that we cannot see, because the police never gave it to the public. Probably because they could be sensitive images, in which Sean carries from the store to the car a black trash bag, one of these big bags, loaded. He carries it, leaves it in the back of the car, gets in it, and leaves. At noon. She decided to close her business at noon to take away. What? You might be wondering what she bought inside the market. It's a small detail within all this. Well, she took gloves, bleach, and a large trash bag. John Litham, up until that moment, was just a 31-year-old man, a shop owner, married with children, and who, in fact, had a small 9-year-old daughter named Paige. He was just another member of the community, someone who was seen running his shop on a regular basis. Something that probably no one would have imagined he would commit a crime, or even have imagined the reasons behind such a thing. Pamela, Paige's mother, did an interview with the Anything Goes with James English channel, in which she talks about the whole case, the context, the impact, etc., about how the case was handled in a more personal way. And in this, she explains that John approached her and her family during the time of the disappearance to talk about Paige, who also supported them during the search, who talked about how bad he felt, who hoped that Paige would appear soon and asked the family to meet with him to be able to talk about her, to get to know her a little more, which, in reality, turns out to be an absolute nonsense. I don't know if he thought that maybe if they didn't have evidence of what had happened inside the store, they couldn't prove that he did something. He may have believed they couldn't imprison him without the videos. However, justice doesn't operate that way. Anyway, beyond everything that was found, he kept saying that he was not guilty. He continued for months, over and over again, saying that he had done nothing and that the girl had simply left the place, even though it didn't match with the security cameras. Until around October, he admitted that he was indeed guilty of the crime and confessed to having murdered Paige. 7 months after the events, on October 12, 2016, the Supreme Court of Glasgow sentenced him to a minimum of 27 years in prison before he could apply for parole. In 2017, his mandatory years were reduced to 23. Now I want to make something clear. Even though this seems crazy, these are still mandatory years before he can apply for international parole. Which means that it's not that they're going to give it to him at 23 years, but rather, he can ask for freedom. After that number of years, he can ask for it, but they probably won't grant him freedom. It's understood that in these cases, the guilty party often asks for freedom, but they don't grant it. For that reason, I don't think they'll let him go free. Honestly, I don't think that's possible, because he directly admitted to this crime, and truthfully, it was no small crime. Calm down. In fact, with the things we saw, we can say that it was even planned. As for the explanation of the facts, according to his version, it's another nonsense. According to him, Paige comes in that day to ask for something to eat, and while she's ordering the food, they start talking. And the conversation turns to Paige's job. She tells him that she's not very satisfied, which is a complete lie, and she starts to tell him that she wants to change jobs. That, in fact, she would like to work at that place. So Sean, in a very kind way, tells her that he can obviously hire her and that he was also short of a person, right? He gives her a form to start filling out, and when he sees that she is 15 years old, he explains that he can't hire her. So Paige, for some reason, gets angry and starts telling him that if he doesn't hire her, she's going to accuse him of touching her. All of this supposedly happens in the back of the store. So John starts thinking about his brother, who was accused of having abused someone. And he was on the sex offender list because he was an offender. John starts thinking about how badly his brother was treated, how badly people treated him, that he couldn't get hired anywhere. And then he thinks that maybe it would be the end of the world if this girl accuses him of abuse, and at that moment, he decides that the best thing he could do is kill her to silence her. No person in their right mind has such a huge mental lapse. To fall into the conclusion that in order not to be accused of being an abuser, you have to kill the person. First, a small detail on top of all this. To accuse someone of abuse, you must provide the police with a medical report showing evidence of the abuse. This is the first necessary proof. In the cases I know of, that's how it's normally done, though there may be other conditions or factors involved. If you didn't touch her, she could report it to the police or anyone else she chose. If she shows no signs of abuse, you likely won't face serious consequences beyond some questioning from others. At least it wouldn't be so terrible, let's say, the matter, for you to decide to kill her. In any case, we're also talking about a man who carried a large black garbage bag in broad daylight, around all the people who saw him work every day. That is, there were many witnesses around. I suppose you can't ask for much logic from this person. It's possible, in my opinion, that something else happened. It's possible that he actually attacked her at first, and that's why her body ended up like this. He didn't want to tell the truth about what he did. He wanted to blame her and say that she was actually the one who tried to blackmail him. But it's clear to everyone that it wasn't like that. On top of everything, and this comes from a comment I saw in the interview with the mother, why would she, who had a job she loved very much, suddenly go to this deli wanting to change jobs? And on top of that, was it so necessary to accuse a person of abuse if they didn't give her the job? At no point does this conclusion make sense. At no point does this story make sense. The number of stabbings makes me think that she actually rejected him, and that's the real story. That maybe he tried to do something to her, and that's why, seeing the rejection, it caused this feeling of hatred that made him stab her more than 60 times. But also, the group had injuries from different objects, from different things. That is, it couldn't have been a spur-of-the-moment impulse. He went to look for other things in the midst of all this, to torture her. He knew what he was doing. Besides, Paige was small in body. That is, at no time, simply, he could have said that he was defending himself from her. Defending from what? On top of that, in the part where we discussed that Sean went with the family to talk about Paige, it seems to me that what he probably would have been doing is more like gathering information. It's likely that he didn't know her well enough to know about her private life and be able to make up an excuse or something that was at least believable. So he went with the family to ask her some questions to learn more about her life. Use this information to create the lie that she wanted to change jobs. Unsurprisingly, no one believed her when she came back, as she had always expressed how much she enjoyed her job. She wanted to continue in the hair salon. She wanted to advance in this, and when she graduated from high school, she wanted to work in that. So, it didn't make sense that she suddenly asked to go make food near her house. It had nothing to do with what she wanted to do in the future. So, wouldn't it make sense for her to waste time losing her job, that she liked to go to this one? If you're thinking also that maybe they had a previous romance, right? No evidence was found of any of these things. For a while, there were people wondering if maybe she was pregnant, and that's why he killed her. However, no autopsy was performed, and nothing was found. In addition, there were no messages, calls. There was no strange number on Paige's phone to think that they were talking. It was only from John's side. On the other hand, we also have to talk about what the mother said in the interview. That is, she suffered for quite some time the harassment of many people on social networks. Mostly fake profiles. Pamela doesn't usually cry in interviews. She didn't cry during the documentary that I saw, and she was accused of not showing feelings about the case. In fact, during the documentary, you can see how people speak fondly of Paige, more than with a feeling of sadness. In this interview, conducted 2 years later, she doesn't appear overly distressed. And the thing is, she herself expresses it by saying that there's no point in showing these emotions, because there's nothing to be done. Regardless of her tears, the blame is clear, and what happened to her is known. That's the essence of the situation. But it's also what I've said and say in several cases, that sometimes the family doesn't show feelings publicly when they're in front of the camera. And that's normal. Honestly, anyone who is going to accuse the family, the mother, of not showing feelings technically, they even accused her of being an alcoholic. On top of that, she had nothing to do with it. Honestly, anyone who does that is probably a despicable person, I must say. It's not fair that this person and the family have to endure such comments, simply for not having shown enough tears on television. It's a clear case, and the one at fault is known. It was known almost from the beginning. It was obvious. The girl never leaves a single store, never. Let's say she must still be inside, or something must have happened to her inside. In my opinion, it's clear that he never told the truth and is lying about what occurred throughout this entire case, because the story directly makes no sense. What he made up doesn't make the slightest sense. From the beginning of Paige's work to the point where she accuses him or wants to accuse or blackmail him for abuse. Honestly, it doesn't make the slightest sense. And even if that part were true, it still doesn't make sense that he chose to kill her at that moment, nor does it make sense in relation to the wounds she had on her body. There was a certain amount of planning in that, even if he planned it at that very moment. Let's hope that Sean is not given freedom. I sincerely hope they never let him out of prison and don't grant him parole, because he obviously doesn't deserve it. So well, this is where we end with the case. I have nothing more to say. Can you recommend cases below in the comments? I'm always reading them. On the side are my Patreons. Thank you all for watching my videos and supporting me from that platform. To learn more about Patreon, check the link in the description below, where everything is explained in detail. Thank you for watching my YouTube videos and commenting on them. I really appreciate you recommending them to others. It helps me a lot. Check out this new video and the recommended one. Subscribe by clicking on my face. See you in another video. Goodbye.